We are in the agenda, we're at the budget items. Now, we'll talk about those. Committee Chair, Chris Mote is not here today, so I'm going to ask Seth Kinshaw to provide a committee report for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. The Budget and Productivity Committee met on August 25th, and it was a very, for the first time in a long while with all of the budget work that has been going on. It was a relatively brief meeting. We heard from and reviewed 3 capital projects, which you will be hearing a presentation on one of those today. And that was the business carried out by the committee on August meeting. I think Alicia is here from Purdue. You could begin.
Thank you, Seth. So yeah, the first project is Purdue University of West Lafayette. Max W. and Maylene Brown Family Hall renovations, found on page 9. And I'd like to invite Alicia Knapsinger, Director of Government Relations and Fiscal Policy Analysis, to present this. Thanks, Alicia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. So the project before you today from Purdue is the Max W. and Maylene Brown Family Hall renovation. This is going to be the renovation of about 32,000 gross square feet. of the first floor of the building. It was formerly the electrical engineering building on campus. The renovation is going to include several instructional labs, lab support spaces, computational research labs, classrooms, offices, the electrical shop, and a collaboration area. So those computational research labs specifically, they're going to support work being done by up to 15 researchers and 150 grad students. Our School of Electrical and Computer Engineering is the largest school in the College of Engineering right now. It serves over 1,700 undergraduates and about 1,000 grad students. This reno is going to address the need for larger class sizes due to the strategic enrollment growth in the College of Engineering, specifically in the electrical and computer engineering programs. And this kind of goes back to what the commissioner was talking about earlier with growing our engineering graduates. So currently, the first floor instructional space accommodates 128 students. And with this renovation, we'll be able to accommodate 207 students at once. That's a 60% increase in student capacity. We're also addressing some ADA accessibility issues in the building, putting in overhead doors that will allow the larger space to then be divided into smaller spaces if needed. New flooring, lighting, more restrooms in the first floor, upgrading the mechanical, electrical, and HVAC systems as well. So the funding for this project, the total is $14,573,000, with $14 million coming from gift funds and $573,000 coming from our operating funds. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions? Okay, thanks, Alicia. Staff will provide the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. As you just heard from Alicia, what was discussed during the Budget Productivity Committee meeting and heard again today is the enrollment growth opportunity that this will provide the School of Engineering. For this reason, and also the fact that we very much appreciate gift funds for capital projects, staff recommends approval of this project.
Thanks, Seth. Any questions for Seth? All right.
Gift funds means from non-tax dollars.
Philanthropic support, yes.
Thank you. Just making sure.
Have a motion?
I move approval.
Second. Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. All right. Next, we have two capital projects on the agenda for expedited action listed in your agenda book, beginning on page 17. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. All right, we have, we'll move on to our academic affairs items, and I'll ask the committee chair, Ed Berger, to provide a committee report. Ed?
AA&Q committee met on August 22nd. Just pulling up the agenda to remind myself of everything that we covered. The 6 programs on the agenda for expedited action were covered in great depth, and actually our colleagues from Indiana, from IU, took a very, what appeared to be a complicated set of offerings offered at different campuses, and actually gave a really effective presentation that made it very clear what they were trying to accomplish with that. So we had a really healthy discussion, and we appreciate the clarity that they provided on that, explaining that to the AA&Q. So those will appear on the agenda for today. I think that's it.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Ed? Okay, thanks, Ed. At our last meeting, Dr. Sauer mentioned the expansion of opportunities for students to complete the Indiana College Core in high school. And today, Charlie Beazer is going to provide an update on this effort. And before that happens, either Charlie or Commissioner Lowry will introduce a special guest that's ready. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. Ken Sauer would love to have been here today. He has the flu. I think I might have mentioned that earlier today. But I have to share this with all of you, your friends with Ken. Ken is at home in bed with flu, and I'm not making this up. A half hour ago, sent edits to the governor's office for some bullet points we're all pulling together. So he's at home editing bullet points because that's just how Ken rolls. So I know we all miss him here today, but Charlie is going to do a wonderful job of giving sort of an overview around the Indiana College Core. Ken is going to dig into it much more deeply next month for you. And in a moment, we're going to ask a very special friend of the commission and one of Indiana's finest leaders to say a few words about the Indiana College Core. And that is our incredible partner in all of this work, Secretary of Education, Katie Jenner. As we get ready to hear briefly from her and then the update from Charlie, I want to remind everyone, guests in the room and certainly commission members, that the Indiana College Core is central to the recommendations we made as we put out the readiness report back in June. You know, we've talked about the other things, the 21st Century Scholars Program, OBAN, and the funding formula, and this is central to it. The Indiana College Core is good for students. It's good for Indiana. I went to a couple of different sources earlier this week and asked, could you just verify for me how impactful dual credit is to the success of students? Let's be abundantly clear about it. Dual credit means a world of difference for students. And you can think of it this way. A student who gains dual credit of sort of any level, taking dual credit, has a higher likelihood of matriculating to college, of persisting and completing. When you step that up to the Indiana College Core and or AP credits added to those dual credits, there is an even higher likelihood of the student matriculating, persisting, and completing on time. When you look at the Indiana College Core, I will remind you that in the report that we issued this summer, 91% of those students, which I believe is the highest of any category we could find, go on to college. And now we're gaining in the number of College Core students, and Charlie's going to talk with you about how excited we are. Schools are being added, students are being added, but it's impactful. And again, matriculating, persisting, completing, this really matters. And it's part of the reason I know Secretary Jenner has leaned into it. If you recall, a little bit ago this morning, there was a reference, I think, around dual credit by maybe President Ellspermann. And if you look at the credentials that their school, Ivy Tech, is awarding 6,000 and some at the high school level between certificates, technical, and the Indiana College Core at 6,000 and some. That's almost 10% of all high school graduates in Indiana in a given year. And that's just that institution. I'm going to be quiet now and turn it over to our friend Secretary Jenner, because I think she's going to share with you some audacious goals that we are joining in because we believe Hoosier students deserve it. And the fact of the matter is they're just more successful in these types of pursuits while still in high school. Secretary Jenner, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Loudly and clearly. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, we're just delighted you joined us. We know your schedule is incredibly busy. You have graciously agreed to step out of another important meeting and join us. The floor is yours. Thanks for your partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I cannot say enough about how thankful we are as Department of Education, State Board of Education, as just the whole K-12 community to continue partnering with higher education. And I think now more than ever, that partnership is not only an opportunity, but it's an urgency to really lean in, blur the lines together, and make the most impact for our communities, of course, for Indiana, and most importantly for our people, our students. So a few things that I'd like just to level set, and I know Charlie is going to present, so I don't want to steal any of her thunder. But you've probably, I know that you've heard me say this before, a couple of key data points. For every student who graduates an Indiana high school, regardless of school type, we collect the data on exactly what their plans are post-graduation. And we know that as recently as 2021, that 76% of those students planned to continue their training, continue their higher learning, 76%. We also know that you, the commission, released in June that only 53% are actually going. So we're losing 20 to 23% of a cohort who wants to continue going to college. And I think that's an important note of reference, because sometimes people push on me, probably push on you and say, well, why shouldn't high school be just high school? Why are we blurring the lines? And so just note that we have many kids who plan to continue forward, 20% who don't end up making it. But then to Commissioner Lowry's point about college credit, dual credit, AP credit, let's talk about the opportunity there. We know that approximately 64%, 64% of our students leave with college credit. The average student leaves with 13.5 credits, and a short-term credential begins at 15 to 18 credits. So many of our students are sitting in our Indiana classrooms right now as seniors, juniors and seniors within one credential, which could include the Indiana College Core or a CTE credential, which makes our opportunity, again, in working together with you as a commission, more urgent than it's ever been, especially as Indiana right now is lagging in our educational attainment as a state. And so what does it mean to blur the lines and work with higher education? We think that now is the time to really rethink high school to make sure we are as intentional as possible in the coursework we're asking students to complete. We're as intentional as possible in making sure that 11th and 12th grade year includes access to a post-secondary credential, not just random acts of dual credit, but a post-secondary credential of value, and also a quality work-based learning experience. We have launched, and again, Charlie's about to, I think, present to you, but we've launched in partnership with you, the Crossing the Finish Line, which was a big bet that we made spring of 2021 together. We've had great results. Many of the students who you will see that we have outcomes for didn't even realize they were this close to a credential. So it shows our opportunity there, and making sure all kids know, making sure our counselors and our school leaders know as well. So we've had great success there. We've also had great success in increasing schools offering the Indiana College Core. Last week, I visited about 20 schools across Indiana. One of them was Crawford County. Crawford County is one of our poorest counties in Indiana. I visited the elementary school and was specifically looking at their reading and their STEM opportunities, and then visited their high school. And one of the couple things that I would highlight that they were most proud of is they were leaning in on pathways of completion, specifically CTE, and they now in Crawford County, Indiana, offer the Indiana College Core in full in their building. And and somebody said they said, if Crawford County can do it, anyone can do it. And I wholeheartedly believe that, and we have to, again, increase that access. So all of that information, all of that level setting, the big bets and the success that we're seeing, we believe by 2030, in partnership with you, by 2030, that 60% of Indiana students can earn a credential of value by the time they graduate high school. That's going to mean, again, that we work together to rethink that 11th and 12th grade year to make sure it's as intentional as possible. Today, really without any systematic trying of this, we're at 7.7%. And again, we wholeheartedly believe with that intentionality that we can get there. And Commissioner Lowry, this is one of those moments that I can only see you and Judd Fisher and Dan Peterson, like a few of your faces. So I need you to tell me, I need you to read the room for me and tell me what else I could share that would be helpful, or just what else. Again, we are eager partners with you and glad to answer any questions and stay on as long as would be helpful.
Secretary Jenner, Katie, lots of positive emotions on faces, heads nodding. Thank you for your graciousness and willing to be with us. I doubt for you there will be many questions. Real quickly, before you would need to go, we'll check if there are questions or comments from anyone. Please.
Hello, ma'am. This is Erica Studerman. I'm fairly new to the commission board, but one of my priorities on my portfolio, I'm looking at continuing education for people with disabilities. And does that fall into your wheelhouse as well?
So continuing education with people with disabilities, are you specifically thinking about like voc rehab? Is that what you're specifically hitting on?
No, I have a daughter who I had to send to Chicago to get some continuing education after she graduated from high school, where it was a 2-year program at National Louis University. And she earned college credits, 12 college credits. So she has an intellectual disability. So that was incredible. She developed a resume because she had 2 years of work experience that was developed by National Louis University. And this could have more easily started in the high school level for her. And I'm wondering if there's any possibility of starting that skills that most people wouldn't even think that they would have, so that she or he might be able to go on to hopefully an Indiana school who would have a similar program as National Louis University. So I wouldn't have to send her so far away. I mean, it worked out well, but it seems like Indiana ought to be able to have those kind of programs too. But it would be best to start it at the high school level.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up, and I'm glad I also didn't rabbit hole on voc rehab, and you clarified, you shared exactly what you were asking. 100%. We have to look at students with special needs. I mean, we know that in Indiana, we have around 16% of students identified with special needs. And we also know that we have students with special needs who are earning college credit right now, and who are leaving with college credit right now in Indiana. But I think what we'll find across the state is just like what you're about to hear from Charlie Bieser. We have an access opportunity. We have an access challenge right now that we need to immediately tackle when it comes to access to college credit in our high schools. When we have Crawford County who offers the whole core. You're going to see, I think, Chris Lowry, a 68% increase in high schools offering the college core, of which students with disabilities can absolutely be a part of. But when we look across the state, we have varying access. And you asked the question about students with special needs. I would also emphasize our Black students, our Hispanic students, our EL students. We see some access challenges there that we're both all leaning in to overcome. And I'm glad to talk to you more about that because offline, it sounds like you have some direct experience that we could probably learn from. So I would enjoy that opportunity to connect with you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Secretary General, thanks for offering that. I was about to text you to say, hey, it needs to be to set up dinner for the three of us. So yeah, you just cut to the chase there.
Absolutely. And Commissioner, I plan to stay on as long as I can. I want to hear this data that Charlie has to share as well. And obviously, as long as I'm on, I'm glad to answer questions. And many of you on the commission have my cell phone directly. You can reach out at any time. And if you don't have my cell phone, Chris Lowry can either share my number or set up dinner for us, either way. But I appreciate being a part of this meeting today.
Well, I would say again, we're grateful not only that you joined us today, but for your leadership and your partnership. I have to take 15 seconds to share something else with all of you that's not, it is long-term germane to all of this. You might have seen about a week and a half ago, Secretary General and the governor announced a $111 billion commitment, most of it from philanthropy, generosity of the Lilly Endowment, and to support literacy efforts in our state because students have fallen behind because of the pandemic. That was remarkable. It was so remarkable. If you didn't see it, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday or the day before where Secretary General was quoted and this was being lifted up. It's so significant. And the opportunities that this will provide children in the long term. And then as we think about the Indiana College Corps, this is the way we lift up our fellow Hoosiers and provide greater opportunities. So Secretary General, thanks for, I know the work you put into that to make that happen. So we're grateful. We'll turn it over to Charlie Baker now.
Thank you, Commissioner Lowry. Thanks, Dr. Jenner. I can't see your face, but I'm sure it's lighted up like usual when you talk about these great things. Thanks, Mr. Chairman, too. I am obviously not Ken, so I am going to focus a little bit more on the higher level aspects of the College Corps, specifically around access and communications. First, in your packet, I want to just direct your attention very quickly to the press release that we put out yesterday. It's a joint press release between the Commission and the Department of Education. So really thrilled anytime we had a chance to really put out something together, both for our logos at the top and quotes from Dr. Jenner and Commissioner Lowry. Allison Keir and Holly Lawson on the DOE team have done a great job of doing a lot of the communications work behind the scenes on this. So I need to give them a shout out as well. If you have any deeper questions than what's in this press release and what I'm going to present today, go ahead and hold on to those. Well, ask them if you want, and if not, Ken will be here next time and he will be able to give you the full in-depth information. So with that, I just want to go ahead and really quickly kind of set the stage of what the College Corps is, remind everyone of what we're really talking about here. So again, a block of 30 credit hours of general education, college level coursework transfers to and among our public institutions and some private institutions. You can see on the slide here, in fiscal year 2022, we had 2,300-ish high school students awarded the ICC certificate. And since 2014, we've had over 10,000 high school students awarded this certificate. So this is really fantastic. Again, it can be delivered through a combination of dual credit, AP courses, IB courses, dual enrollment, lots of different ways for students to earn this. And then post-secondary students can earn it as well and transition between different colleges as they need to do so. So here's some of the benefits. Cost savings, obviously, especially if you earn this in high school, you're going to take $25 per credit hour, so you can earn it for a whole year of college, essentially for less, $750 or less. And earners are then more likely to graduate on time or early, as the Commissioner mentioned earlier. And it also is more likely, you're more likely to attend college, succeed while you're there. It opens up additional opportunities for you as well in college. You can take some major specific coursework earlier instead of needing to get in some general education credits. Again, you can add a minor, study abroad, lots of other ways to make your college career even more immersive and career relevant. And here's just some of the statistics off to the side. So about 94%, somewhere between 90 and 94%, I'm going to say right now, earn the college for high school students who earn the college for went on to attend college. So the big news of the week, and as part of the press release that we put out, is that there are new providers, both at the high school level and at the post-secondary level of who can deliver the college for. And also, I'll show you where you can find out who those high schools, which of those high schools are which. Very quickly, I want to show sort of where we are, where we have been. If you look at the slide, it shows the different amounts of college core certificates that have been awarded over the last, not quite 10 years, 8 years, between Ivy Tech, Vincennes University, and then the total is the gray line at the top. So that 2,362 number is what I read earlier, but you can see Ivy Tech awards the majority of them, and then Vincennes has awarded around 500 in the past year alone.
And is that the full 30 hours of credit or just partial?
Yeah, this is the whole,
The full 30.
the whole shebang, as I
Okay,
say.
good.
But the great news is we also now have 57 new high schools added to our 84 previous high schools. So we are now at 141 high schools, which can offer the Indiana College Core. So that takes us where we used to say the College Core. Now we can bump it up a little and we can say to over 1 and 4. We're still working to get to the 1 and 4 and then the 1 and 3, and then hopefully, again, the goal is for every student in Indiana to have the access to earn the Indiana College Core. That also is really important to recognize on the side of this slide. We have now 8 public post-secondary providers. So joining Ivy Tech and Vincennes, i.e. Bloomington, all 5 of the Indiana University regional campuses, Purdue, University Northwest, and Purdue Fort Wayne are our first 4-year providers of the core. I'm not going to go into the great details of how a school becomes a delivery site, but one of the most important pieces to remember is that for a high school to be able to offer the core, they have to partner with a primary post-secondary provider. So again, this is a blurring the lines, as they say, of high school and the K-12 and the college space. And then finally, not finally, I've got more slides. For this part though, if you would really like to know if the schools in your area or anywhere, maybe the school you went to, if they're offering the core, you can go to transferin.net. I've got, if you pull up the slides, I linked the map, you can just click it, it'll take you right there. There's also the link right there, but a great search function to see if your school or a school you are interested in offers the core. And of course, the great map that shows really the statewide spread of the schools that are offering it right now. So, oh, go ahead. Commissioner.
Yeah, Charlie, thank you. I would just add quickly too, I'd look at Michelle Ashcraft, who is already in strategic mode, thinking how we add more of these schools. You know, a 70% increase in schools in 1 year. That's pretty breathtaking. But I know Secretary Jenner and I and our teams look at it and say that puts us up to roughly 140. There are about 500 high schools we count, and we'll rest for a moment once we know each one of those schools is offering this to our future students.
So now
Again,
comes my favorite
Commissioner,
part. Oh,
Commissioner,
Go ahead.
if I could chime in on that, I think one major opportunity we have is many schools are still learning what the Indiana College Core even is, right? So this has existed for about 10 years, and what we're finding is for some of our high school principals and high school guidance counselors, very simply, this is new information. This is a new conversation. Which also allows us enormous acceleration potential here.
So for my favorite part of anything is how do we communicate it? And that's, thank you, Dr. Jenner, for setting that up so perfectly into how we actually continue to spread the word and make sure more of our educators, parents, families, that they're asking for this to be offered and inquiring about it for their students at their local high schools. So again, I have to shout out Allison Kier, who's our communications and PR manager. I know she's listening right now. She is the power and the brains behind our communications plan for the celebrating the 10th anniversary of the College Corps, which again, we just announced yesterday. So again, this is a broad communications campaign focusing on a whole lot of things. Importantly, the numbers that I've shared already, but also just celebrating the fact that this is an opportunity that has grown so steadily and consistently for students over the past 10 years. We've been working really closely with the communications and government relations teams at each of our new institutions to offer the Corps. So I need to thank them as well for their participation with this and their teamwork in this as well. Some of the other things that we've done, we sent information over Counselor Talk, which is a space that most of our educators, school counselors are paying a lot of attention to and have a chance to dialogue with each other. And then the fabulous communications team at the Department of Education is going to be including some information again to educators in their newsletter this Friday. We also have a great social media toolkit that includes sample posts and graphics. We've got some examples here on the side of the slide. And then I just want to we're reminding everyone, and can remind you all as well, that we created an educator guide and toolkit specifically about the Indiana College Corps at the beginning of this year. So there's no dearth of resources that we are trying to put behind this to make sure that it is easily understood and widely shared. And how are we talking about the Corps? This is a really important piece of the higher education value message that we've been spreading. Again, getting us closer to the 60% goal for educational attainment in the state as well. So, obviously, top line messages, if you were to be asked what things that you would want to share, these are some really highlights that you could share. Saves time and money for students. Again, those 10,000 plus high schoolers who have earned the Corps roughly equates to about $225 million in savings since 2014. So that's nothing to sneeze at. And again, the success of those students who go on to earn the Corps, they're more likely to go to college, more likely to persist, succeed, graduate on time or early. What's important for us from a communications lens is continuing to provide helpful resources for the trusted messengers, because as I think I told you all in June, unfortunately, higher education and the government itself not really looked at as the most trustworthy. Obviously, we know we're trustworthy, but we have to work with what we've been given. So that means we really have to work hard to equip our teachers, school counselors, principal students, community leaders, people that students and families can turn to and listen to, so that they have the information that they can help us share. And again, our goal at the end of the day is at least that every single high school student should have the opportunity to earn the Corps while they are in high school. And then something near and dear to my heart is the Crossing the Finish Line initiative, which Dr. Jenner talked about earlier. And just to remind everyone what this is, this was an immediate response to the challenges caused and created by the pandemic. And so the Department of Education, in partnership with the CHE and really strong partnership with Ivy Tech Community College and Vincennes University. And what we did was over the summers of 2021 and 2022, covered tuition fees, books, other expenses. Any way that students could transfer credit from other institutions to get it all combined, not only to focus on the Indiana College Corps, but was a big part of this, but to immediately help students who were impacted by COVID-19, who maybe either didn't know how close they were to finishing a credential while in high school, or they were possibly impeded because of the pandemic. So we were targeting high schoolers, high school graduates, and sometimes juniors, depending on how close they were to completing and if they were interested. So those who were near completers, within about 9 to 15 credit hours of completing a credential, including up to an associate degree. We were communicating with them directly and through the schools to try to encourage them to sign up at Ivy Tech or Vincennes and to finish getting crossing the finish line, right? We came up with that for a reason. And so I'm excited to share some brand new data. And this right now represents only information from Ivy Tech. But I think you can see, and they're the largest provider crossing the finish line. But I think you can see some really impressive information and results that have happened because of this program. So in 2021, 714 degrees or credentials were awarded to graduating juniors or graduating high school seniors during the summer. Since that time, an additional 900 degrees or credentials have been awarded through Ivy Tech since those students' participation in the Crossing the Finish Line program. So the grand total then looking backwards is just over 1,600 post-secondary degrees and credentials that have been awarded to high school students as they're graduating. Yeah, right.
Just quickly,
Sure.
Charlie, this is such impressive information. So for this Crossing the Finish Line program, it was the commission staff that identified those students,
Ivy Tech and Vincent identified their own students.
the universities, okay. And then the other question is, to identify, how to get all students access to identify how to get access for all students to the college core. Is it the guidance counselor that's really the key? Because I saw with my my children, signing up for high school classes now today is about like signing up for college classes when some of us were in college. So it's not simple. It's not just an automatic. So most students probably don't select their high school classes themselves. It's a key to go to the counselor.
I think the counselor, and this is me speaking with not as much knowledge as Dr. Sauer would give you, but I think the relationship between the school counselor and the student family is so critical to walking through all the, because we have so many really great options and opportunities here in the state for students to do this. But yeah, it's not necessarily as easy maybe as it was when I was in high school. It's a little more complicated today. And so that's where, again, it's incumbent upon the commission and the department to really work together to try to figure out whether it's a technology solution, whether it's just continuing to make sure that our guidance, our school counselors have this information at their fingertips and are well-versed in explaining to students the importance of this. I think it's so critical for students to know what is available to them.
Can I jump in as well and add, and I think that was Pepper maybe who asked the question. So absolutely the high school counselor is key. It is also the middle school counselor, right? And making sure that they're signing up for 21st Century Scholars and believing that they can. It's also the high school principal who's working to build that master schedule of courses and facilitate partnership with higher ed. So really, I think what we're talking about is, and when I say rethinking high school, or when Commissioner Lowry says rethinking high school, it's building out a system where all children have access, and this is more commonplace. It's a known opportunity. One of the other things I'd add, in launching Crossing the Finish Line last year, we determined, by the way, the funding was there to launch in April. We launched in June, really fast turnaround. The biggest kind of golden nugget from that, this was done because COVID hit, but it was a big gold nugget opportunity, because what we found, they were that close. Counselors didn't know they were that close. Principals didn't. Higher ed, Vincennes and Ivy Tech linking arms with our K-12 high schools. I think that probably is also why we've ushered in an increase in Indiana College Core, because people know about it. And again, so much, while COVID hit us on many negative fronts, we've also learned a significant amount through that, and then can accelerate beyond. And this is one of those acceleration discovery moments.
Well, kudos, way to go.
I really do need to take a second, just based off of what Dr. Jenner said, to really, really thank and highlight the partnership that we got from Ivy Tech and Vincent's, or Dr. Rebecca Ruschulte, just kind of ushered this program into existence, I think out of sheer force of will at some point. And Dr. Nicole Schenkel from Vincent's has been a huge part of this as well from the Vincent side.
Erica Studerman again, ma'am. One of the things that we learned in the Air Force when we're looking for minority individuals to become pilots and navigators and bombardiers and Air Force officers is that we have to influence the influencers who are in a lot of minority families. Anecdotally, I've been told, could be grandparents and obviously the parents too, but you have to start at the grade school level. I still go into grade schools and middle schools and speak in my full uniform so that they know that women can be in the military too. And so you've got to start it really young. And I would think making sure they know about the Indiana Corps would be a good place to start it, is in third grade maybe, so that you can get to those grandparents somehow.
Absolutely. And I put so far in parentheses on this slide because we are not yet at the end. As I said, we just also had an additional 900 degrees awarded for last year, sort of retroactively. So right now, having wrapped up most of summer, we've got 1,325 degrees or certificates awarded to high school students in the state of Indiana through crossing the finish line. And of the 834 technical certificate completions, almost 800 of those, 798 are representative of the Indiana College Board itself. So I think it's safe to say that this program has done exactly what it was intended to do, which is to get that more of this opportunity in front of students. One thing I didn't put on the slide, if we were to look at, and I know Commissioner Lowry always wants to know what's the outcome and the metric and the savings for students, and he's not wrong. In 2021, this summer, $1.4 million saved for students and families through being part of Crossing the Finish Line. And this summer, so far alone, $2.5 million savings. So almost $4 million that have been saved for students and families to do this. And again, very generous support from the Department of Education to make this possible. So with that, I'll take any other questions and turn it over back to you.
Okay. Yeah, Dan Peterson here, and first for Secretary Jenner, just in your comment about reading the room earlier, I wouldn't want to pretend to be a great room reader, but I can tell you, I think I'm reading in the unified appreciation and focus that we all have on the importance of all the work we've talked about here, not only on the Common Core and certificate, or excuse me, crossing the finish line stuff, but the other pieces that were referenced, including the science of reading grant and your passionate and urgency around these issues is just so appreciated, and along with the collaboration with with Commissioner Lowry and so many others across the state that are really leading the human capital effort. So thank you, number one. Number two, on the College Core piece, I mean, I understand for sure the cost implications of the expansion of capability of getting the College Core completed before leaving high school. No question, it's amazing. But can you talk a little bit about how that strategy also then ties into, reversing the downward trend that we've seen of people not going on to post-secondary? How does it fit into some of the other dynamics that we're seeing here as it relates specifically to I'm not talking the certificates, but the Common Core itself?
Yeah, and Dan, thank you. I think that's just a stellar question. I know I fumbled the ball just a little bit earlier ago. I was understating the impact of that. Actually, I think I said 91%. Charlie, thank you for having the right number in there. So as we pause and think about the going rate, that we have elevated and said, look, this is a challenge. But to steal from Secretary Jenner, we're not going to admire the problem. We need to get after it. But when we look at that, we say 53%, we can disaggregate it. We start to look for the bright spots, right? 21st century scholars, they go at 81%. Wow. And those kids are only from lower income homes. Bright spot. You know, we look at kids who earn an honors diploma, 84 or 5%, something like that. The single category that we could find the very highest rates of going beyond high school for those who are in the Indiana College Corps. 94% of those students go on. And then once they arrive, they persist better, they complete it. And that's just in the College Corps.
Chicken and egg though.
This
What-
block of 30.
So, you know, would that group have gone on anyway?
Oh, I love that question. Yeah. Yeah, it's like you can set that up for me, Dan.
I didn't.
Yeah, I know, but
You didn't.
yeah. So there are a couple of things. I think I was sharing this maybe with some of our team. I think I did with Secretary Jenner. I'm always keenly interested in that question. You know, is it chicken or egg? It was just that the kids who were going to go anyway went. And part of this past Monday, I spent some time looking at publicly available data in two areas. And that included elementary or primary schools and how they did recently on iRead 3. There were some challenges with that, 81% of students statewide who were able to achieve. What I was most interested in were those schools where the population is above the state's average in free and reduced. And I started making a list of those because there are some who are performing at stunningly high levels, including one that I looked at whose free and reduced population is 10% above the state average, and they were at a nearly 98%. That's one example. And so then, Dan, the other that I was looking at were those high schools, many of them were rural, who have come online with the Indiana College Corps, quite frankly, to, you know, maybe to push some of our other schools in the state who haven't kind of yet jumped on board. Some of the early adopters of the Indiana College Corps, we used to have this really long name, statewide transfer general ed corps, that just rolls off the tongue. Some of the early adopters were those schools, and they're leading the way. That there are percentages of kids now going to college, and over the past 5 years ago or so, have just continued to rise. I see Michelle shaking her head. She's probably had experience with that at Purdue, and so I think we're starting to see in the data, and I reference both of those because, again, those are probably two of the most critical things. They start to set up the opportunity for a young child to really be prepared for student to be prepared for college. And so, yeah, the going rate increases, and quite honestly, the ones I was most interested in were those ones where we might look at and say, so would there have really been impact there? There have really been impact.
Awesome.
I'm thrilled you asked that
And
question.
I would add
good.
to what you shared, Commissioner Lowry, and going back to that data point. And I threw a lot of data out in the beginning, but I want to hit it again. The data that we collect for every single Indiana graduate shows us that nearly 80% want to continue training and skilling up their education, and yet only 53% per your report actually make it there a year after. So we know that for whatever reason, life hits our kids, life hits our people, decisions are made. And so we're losing, however you want to slice it, we're thousands of people who wanted to continue going do not go the year after. And I go back to Dan, Crawford County, Indiana, and going in that high school in Crawford County, Indiana, they would have answered that question that you just asked, which is a great one, that no, if they did not offer that Indiana College Corps in full, some of their students would not have gone on. Or maybe I should say, I don't know if it's a no or a yes, however I phrase that, but the bottom line is, if in Crawford County, right, if they did not offer that in full, their students probably would not have continued on to college. And I think those are the students we have to continue to advocate for is our students in poverty, our Black, our Hispanic, our EL, and note that 11th and 12th grade year is prime time to get that head start.
Thank you.
Well, Commissioner Jenner, this is Pepper again. Just going back to that question about the counselors and seeing just how completely overwhelmed they seem to be in the schools, citing that they just don't have time to work with every student and all of the reasons that we hear. And knowing that in so many of the troubled areas, the parents won't engage. They just won't. So can we help enable teachers? I know in many instances, it's clearly an invested teacher that has made the difference to turn a student around. Someone like Dennis Bland, who works with students in the Center for Leadership Excellence, that takes an interest in these students when nobody else has and makes them feel special. So can we get the messaging to the teachers? If they're invested in care, they have all the power.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, we should link arms with as many people who we can to help us move this forward. From Charlie, the research she just shared, again, the trusted source of the teacher or the counselor, or someone mentioned earlier, the grandparent. I mean, that's where the information is flowing. So absolutely, we need to lean in and work on that. One thing you commonly hear in K-12 is, well, what can the state really do to drive K-12 education, right? What can the state really do to impact? And it often goes to accountability, right? Accountability and also how you incentivize progress. So that's another thing I think we have to contemplate as a state. Our accountability model as a state has for years and years and years, and this is most states across our country, if not all states really, it's all about a test score. And so a lot of the national conversation and the conversation in Indiana is what other indicators really matter in an accountability model, because that's what our educators will drive towards. And so, is in an accountability model it appropriate to quantify credentials of value being earned at the high school level? Does it make sense also to look at how the money is flowing financially, and not to take away from what we have today, but to consider how we might incentivize what we would like to see. For example, what if we were to incentivize the Indiana College Core to be completed? I mean, a lot of questions like that as well. And then Pepper, to your question, right? Then within a building, your priorities start to shift, and that counselor now has more time to, rather than focusing on just facilitating an assessment, focusing on making sure additional students have access to the core. And again, that I'm sharing with you several examples, but it's very, very obvious that we have a lot of work to do in this space to impact more kids.
And Secretary General Chris Lowry, again, I would add this point too, and I would reflect on your question, Pepper, and the comment you made a moment ago, Erica, about influencing the influencers. How do we reach students? How do we reach their families? Not only the counselors, the teachers, the principals, the folks in those buildings, but the broader community. And as part of our strategy at the commission, we've declared a truth. There's this Pentagon, and we believe firmly that community and faith-based organizations are a big part of it. What I'd share with you is in the last couple of months, we have spent a lot of time, Charlie smiling, in our office, in large halls, small halls, where two or more are gathered. We're glad to talk about it. And it would be premature to tell you today, organizations that have given their thumbs up on supporting what we've been putting forward, include 21st Century, Oban, and Indiana College Corps, and around the funding formula. But what has just absolutely been delightful is to leave those meetings, those discussions, those presentations, and hours later, sometimes a week later, for a leader from one of those organizations to call one of us and say, could you make an hour to meet with us? Because we think our board and our organization wants to fully endorse where you're headed. And I would just love to rattle off the list of those right now. I'm like looking at some of the team, they're going, not yet, Chris, not yet. But we believe that's what it's going to take, right? That this is partly cultural shift, and influence the influencers. A lot of work to be done there, but we believe we have to use every channel possible, especially as Charlie talks a lot about, you know, the trusted messenger. Whoever wants to be. And I think I speak for you there too, Secretary General.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you circled back to influence the influencer that Erica said. I might steal that from you. I'll credit you though, but that's exactly what we need to do.
I'd go.
Yeah, Secretary General, this is Ed Berger. I'm the faculty rep on the commission. And I'm thinking from the higher ed side, and specifically the curriculum side, I'm wondering if we know the distribution of disciplines that students go into to complete the core. And the reason I think it's important maybe for us to know that, there's at least a few reasons. One is those 30 credits may not be useful in every plan of study equally. So in some plans of study, it may actually allow somebody to graduate in 3 years, whereas in other plans of study, it might not. And if it doesn't allow them to graduate in 3 years, then you could legitimately ask the question, have they saved money? Right? Maybe not, maybe it costs them money. Right, but the other part of this is, I think it's important to get an interior view of what the students are doing, because if they do end up staying 4 years, but one of those is a study abroad experience or a service learning experience or something else, that changes the conversation yet again to look at all the extra value you can get for the same amount of time if you do this work up front. So I love the idea because I think there's so many students who in high school by doing this prove to themselves that they can do college level work. That's a super valuable thing for sure. But I do wonder if we could, if we have the data, I don't know if we do, to look at some of those other pathways as another way to market this and say, well, if you're interested in studying abroad, this helps you do that, right? Or if you're going into a certain kind of, let's say, a STEM discipline, you might want to think about calibrating things this way rather than that way. So I think there's another layer here. And I know we've all got a lot of work to do, and maybe this is a second layer thing. But I feel like that information would be really useful to know, then could then be messaged and out to parents, students, and counselors.
I absolutely true. And I don't want to steal Ken's thunder, but I know that, you know, there's big plans for some new hopeful technological based implementations. An app, that's a like really terrible way to say something like an app that's going to be created to really help make sure students know what the pathway is and if they can take it from the College Core to a TSAP and turn that into something that's, you know, starting in college as a sophomore, for example. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to continue to think of the different ways that we can help students really realize the full benefit that there is available.
The other thing I heard from that question is basically how do we use the longitudinal data to really inform our decision making at the high school level? And I think that's such an important question to back map that from all of the credentials we're looking at, and specifically on the point that about career and technical education. And we know the Indiana College Core is one credential of value opportunity, and so is the CTE space. Is it a information technology GC or TC? Is it a advanced manufacturing? I mean, we could name the subject area, and that's where the next level programs of study in the CTE space are back mapped as well. And we could honestly have a similar similar conversation as to what we're having with the Indiana College Core. The longitudinal data, though, I would have to defer to the commission on that, on if we have that level of data yet that is able to back map. I can tell you we do have that data. We do have more longitudinal data than ever linking together. For example, we're now able to look at every single high school in the state by cohort, so by graduating class, and tell you over a 10-year period what their wage data shows and their sustainable employment data shows, right? So what you just mentioned may be even another iteration that we need to dig more deeply into.
Yes. Thank you. Just as a follow-up on the conversation of data regarding the College Core, it would be helpful to see more disaggregated data as it pertains, say, to race, since we say there are challenges with respect to getting African Americans, Hispanics, low income, maybe rural. But what does the data say about who is and is not participating? What does it say even about school districts, our populations, and their involvement or lack thereof, their correlation between those in high poverty areas and the absence of participation in this program. So that information, I think, would be really helpful in informing us with strategy going forward. The second point, and the final point.
Sorry, Dennis. I was trying to watch your face. If you had a second, keep going.
No, please respond to that.
I tell you, on my screen, your faces on the screen are about like the size of maybe a quarter of a dime. So I'm leaning in so closely. I'm glad that you can't see my face on the screen. So to the first point that you shared about access for students, I hit on that a little bit, and that really can't be hit on enough. We have to understand who is earning it now. And I think we do have that data disaggregated, Dennis, that we can share. I mean, we're certainly looking at that closely. And even on the Indiana GPS dashboard, which we'll be launching yet this fall, we will disaggregate all of our data by student populations, including by race, including by poverty, et cetera. It's so important. What was your second point there, Dennis?
Sure. The second point, I guess it's more dismay, but maybe there's something that can inform us going forward. You indicated earlier that you're finding after 10 years that there's principals, they're educators, even have no knowledge of this College Core program. And that's really shocking. But with that, does that inform us any way as we have any additional strategies or plans going forward in terms of how we may message or communicate differently, what we would do differently so that whatever kind of plan and strategy you have, even for crossing the finish line, is there anything we need to be doing differently, learning from that lesson so that we don't look 10 years hence and saying someone just found out that there's a crossing the finish line initiative?
I will gladly take part of that. Charlie probably saw that. And again, Dennis, thank you. This is something that, to be quite blunt about it, has frustrated me. Having been a reformed school board member, and that school corporation having been maybe one of the very first adopters of the predecessor of this statewide transfer general ed core, it just flummoxed me why school corporations weren't just flocking to it, because it's a way up. And I saw that curve in a part of the state where others nearby meant that works, doesn't it? We can help our students. Yes, it does. So first, that's part of the reason, having observed this and in data as Secretary Jenner expressed, part of the reason it's a priority for us. It's called out as a priority.
didn't have time to like text you or anything, Michelle, but I sat here and I don't know, on one of my pieces of paper, I was thinking about audacious goals for this. And we increased the percentage for the number of schools offering this by roughly 70% in 1 year. And I thought, gosh, what if we just did that for the next few years? Sounds like a goal, doesn't it, Michelle? The reason I share this is if we don't have a goal for these things, I'm not sure where we're trying to reach that. And a 3-year goal of successive 70% increases in the number of schools will literally account for every high school in the state of Indiana. If you give me a little wiggle room, we'll come back next month and tell you whether we actually see our way to that. But that's part and parcel too. We've got to commit to this work. Secretary General has leaned into it. I know this team has leaned into it. All of you have supported what we've put forth. But I think that's a big deal part of it, is to say, are we going to get there? And if so, then by golly, let's commit to it. And in doing so, then what's it take to get there? Well, among other things, it might take having an associate commissioner of K-12 strategy and outreach. 3 days into the job, there's a new goal. Yeah, Dennis, I think that's part of it. You know, I just think it's gold. Y'all tell me to go do something different, and I would gladly go out and talk about the Indiana College Corps every day, because I know how important it is to students and their long-term successes. But the goals, being much more intentional in our communication. I think the communication you have together, Charlie and Allison, who's on your team, is extraordinary. The incentives that Secretary General talked about, in the past, we've not talked about. How do we incent the school to do that? How do we help principals, understand this better? I think those are all part and parcel to it.
So just as a follow-up, Charlie or Secretary General, do you have any insights as to why after 10 years, schools have no knowledge? What are the educators saying? What are the principals saying? What are the superintendents saying? Is it on us? We didn't communicate it? Is it that they had, hey, I'm sorry, but just too many shootings inside our school, more important things to do? I mean, what gives after 10 years and people are just baffled that this is even taking place?
So I'll jump in and then I'm gonna hop off here pretty soon, although I seriously think I could join you all day long, quite frankly. But Dennis, a couple of things. One of the ways that we've been able to, I think, move the needle pretty quickly is because today our arms are linked as not only a Department of Ed and a Commission for Higher Ed, but also with our governor, also with our General Assembly, also with major philanthropies, also with business and industry. I think that it's not been one thing singularly, but it's been all of us working together to push this communication forward. And then going forward, I mentioned this earlier, from the state vantage point, really accountability, and then how we fund anything, whether it's higher ed, whether it's K-12, that really drives where you're pointed, the direction you're pointed. And so we're having this important conversation today, and I really hope that this conversation extends into the 2023 legislative session to make sure that as we have linked arms and already made such progress in a couple of areas, that that we really accelerated even more coming off of a important session.
Thank you.
John wants to say.
Thank you, Charlie. Dennis, you always ask really insightful questions. Usually I come away thinking, man, I wish I had thought of that. So I've been trying over the years to try to think, what is Dennis going to ask? So this time, this is my one chance, so I'm gonna try to take advantage of it. I did look into the College Corps breakouts. This is granted a year ago at this point. And I think it's important to think through, as part of this whole conversation, why are students not taking advantage of it and whatnot? One of the great benefits of rapidly expanding this is usually when we have programs, some of the first adopters are those who have the resources to adopt it, the school districts that have the resources to adopt it, the school counselors who are not stretched thin. Because Lord knows we put a lot on our counselors. So as we expand the College Core, I fully expect it to become much more equitable across the state as we move into a much more wider dispersion. We saw the same with dual credits. Now that we've got roughly 2/3 of all of our high school students earning dual credit, it's much more equitable because we've made it such that every school district, every student both knows about it and has the resources to succeed. So with that, I'll give the breakouts as of about a year or two ago. Indiana College Core recipients, some of which were still going through when it was the SDGC, were slightly more likely to be white students, slightly less likely to be Black students, much more likely to be not to free and reduced lunch students. And so we do have our work cut out for us. I think your suspicions were correct in terms of we've got to dig into this, but just know that we're keeping it top of mind because we do want to make sure that as we roll out and expand the Indiana College Board, that it reaches all students and all corners of the state.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Secretary Jenner, thank you so much for your contributions today, if you're still there. Thank you very much for joining us and spending time with us on the subject. Are you gone? Okay. Well, I thank Secretary Jenner. And Charlie, thank you for filling in too, and thanks for answering so many important things there. And I think I was just talking to Commissioner Lowry with, well, just saying one word, but I've been around the state just recently and over the last past few years, and it just keeps coming up. Why don't I know about this? And so many different subjects, but it's communication and just redundancy, and we don't do it well enough, I don't think, at so many levels, at local and state levels. And it's advertising. It's basically, following the principles of advertising with this stuff and being redundant with the message. I don't know where to go. I don't know what website to go to. I don't know who to call. These are things I hear about, so many different things that could be solved fairly easily, but anyway, that's all I'll say about that for now. Let's move on now to our next subject, but yeah, Mike.
Yeah, I am so sorry, but I do need to leave. I have a public meeting. I have to be to at 6:30 tonight, and it's about just under 4 hours to get home. So I want to say thank you to everybody that I met yesterday and today. Everybody was very welcoming and very accommodating, and I thank everybody for that, and I look forward to our next meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
The next thing we have on our agenda are 6 academic degree programs for expedited action. They're listed in your agenda book, beginning on page 23. Can I have a motion?
Motion made.
Second.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. All right, onto the student success items. Now we'll move on to student success items, and I'll ask the committee chair, Pepper Mulheron, to provide the committee.
We did not meet this month. However, I believe Charlie has some information to share, so I'll defer to her.
It's me again. Been such a long time. One real quick thing I want to make a note of. Thank you, Dennis. It's good fun. I'm gonna blame this on Josh because he found it. In this great cool 4-pager that we gave you, there's a little bit of an error. So we'll come back to you with a fully fixed, it's just not printed version of this in October. So if you have a question, I can point it out to you afterward and give you the actual numbers. But I'll send you an electronic version of it too. So just again, just gonna blame it on Josh. Anytime I-
Please know she's too kind not to blame the commissioner who is
Oh,
want to change things up until 4 minutes after it's gone to print. So she's being kind.
It's okay. Honestly, I just really like to like Josh.
Yes, I have metaphorically brought.
So I am really excited to continue sort of the conversation that we've been having, a little bit of a broader focus than just the College Core, and I'm gonna try not to take up too much time, knowing that we're sort of at the end of our efforts here. But I wanted to give you a quick update into where we are, where we've been this past spring and summer, both from a communications, marketing, and outreach perspective. So our teams have been very busy disseminating our education value messaging throughout the year so far. And so this includes some of the rest of the things that are in your packet, including some collateral that I would encourage all of you to look through. Let me know if you have feedback or thoughts, and encourage you to use in your conversations. So some of these things include a messaging guide. So the information that I shared at our June meeting about the education value work that we've been doing, this really breaks it down into the ways to talk and not talk about college, higher education, some of the research, and this is all based on the research we've done. So it's taking any PowerPoint you've seen so far and boiling it down into a hopefully easy to read, quick access guide for everyone to use. Additionally, there is a one pager, so boiling this 5-page thing down into 1 page even, which should be helpful. And then another additional piece that we've created, which is sort of a cheat sheet to the options of education beyond and training beyond high school in Indiana. So if you ever have it's just a quick reference guide, again, it's going to just talk about some of the things that I've been talking to you about previously. So please feel free to take a look at those, and I'll send electronic versions of them too. I just wanted you to have a copy right now. Again, so as you can see on the slide, the Pentagon, as the commissioner talks about, trying to get beyond just higher education, trying to do this alone. Not that we always have been, but we're being very intentional about making sure other agencies in the government, education itself, community organizations, faith-based organizations, employers, philanthropy they're being looked at as the trusted messengers again, influencing the influencers. And this is part of our strategy of how we go about doing that, is to start making sure we're all speaking from the same sort of playbook. So we will continue on with spreading the good word. But the kind of fun thing is we've had some great national attention lately. Allison Kier and I, to reference her again, she and I were selected to present at this State Higher Education Executive Officers, SHEO, policy conference in August. We've had 7 states and 3 national organizations reach out to us after that presentation and ask either for us to give it again to certain teams in those states. We've talked to Tennessee and Pennsylvania last week. So we're also just making a lot of new relationships and friends around the country. And then additionally, we actually the day of our presentation, this Hetchinger report story that both Commissioner Lowry and I were interviewed for, and it's linked, our Vox research is linked in the story, came out, and then again on NBC News. So we've gotten some great national attention, including the Wall Street Journal article that the commissioner mentioned last night. So I think it's safe to say people in other states are really hungry for this information, the different ways to talk about and how to help curb the enrollment crisis. And so it seems like Indiana is continuing to be a leader in this conversation. One of the things that our communications and outreach teams do every year is we have a presence at the Indiana State Fair. We had this year nearly 5,000 students, parents, families, just general visitors stop by our booth at the State Fair. Here's just a couple of quick snapshots of our, I was trying to figure out how to play a video, but that was too complicated for me. So here's a picture. If you're not following us on Instagram, please do, and then you can go see the videos for yourselves. But very quickly, but intentionally, I want to highlight someone in on our staff who was the main guy behind the State Fair organization this year. He coordinated 32 different volunteers who worked 170 hours, again, from the entire commission, our executive team, and then people from Invest in DWD and ICI. So Arlen Talaferro is also, he's our outreach program. Arlen is fairly new to the commission. He began in November, right? Yep. Okay. But one thing that I'm really excited about, and thank you, Arlen, for being so gracious about letting me talk about this, is Arlen's a bit of living IU history on the commission staff as well. And he very graciously provided me with just a couple of bullet points to talk about someone in his family, his great uncle, George Talaferro, who played in the Big Ten 2 years before Jackie Robinson broke the racial barrier in baseball. He led IU to its only undefeated season. Well, he and the rest of the team, wasn't just him alone. In 1949, he was drafted by the Chicago Bears, and he became the first African-American drafted by an NFL team. And then George Talaferro also had a significant impact at the local level here in Bloomington, both as an undergraduate student and then in an era when the campus and the city of Bloomington were segregated, and later as a longtime university IU staff member. He helped desegregate Bloomington restaurant Gables with the help of IU President Herman B. Wells, who we talked a little bit about last night. Helped desegregate the movie theater in town, and 2 decades of service in a number of capacities, including a special assistant to the president, the IUPUI chancellor, and the dean of the School of Social Work. So I will also say, Arlen told us none of this when he came for his interview. So he got the job all on his own merits, and we were quite astounded to sort of learn of all the history of his family. And it's great to have someone who is part of our team today that is very excited to be doing the mission and continuing the work of a lot of people before him. So thank you, Arlen, for all your work this summer. Okay, so back to marketing. This is, I wanted to give a quick update to what we did in the spring. This was our first real attempt at an influencer campaign where we connected with Jake Query, who is a sports radio host and is one of the announcers for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He was on the radio one day talking, and Teresa's husband heard it. Anyway, got a long story short, we connected with him. And he was really excited to not only go back to finish his degree at IU Kokomo, but to help us engage and influence others who were adult learners in the state of Indiana to try to convince them to take these same steps. The great thing is he has a really awesome social media presence. If you don't follow him on Twitter, and if you're into sports, you're probably missing out. But our goal to work with him was to engage, influence men in particular, that were adult learners 18 and up on the value of higher education. Not only that, to drive them through targeted digital advertising, radio advertising, to sign up for the Workforce Ready grant. So we ran it was a 4-part campaign. We ran radio commercials on iHeartMedia, did a 12-week influencer campaign with some other radio stations and their hosts. We did live Bob and Tom commercials, and then we ran a bracket contest through the NCAA. So if you were in and around the Indianapolis area or ever listening to any of these radio stations, more than likely in the spring, you've heard at least one of our advertisements for the program. And I'm here to share a couple of campaign results. So for our influencer campaign, we had almost 950,000 impressions, 700 link clicks. Our click-through rate is really good. It's twice the industry average. I know 1.16 doesn't sound that high, but that's actually double what it is in the industry average. And our work was successful in reaching male students in particular. And I want to definitely read the tweet here on the side, because I think at the end of the day, this is why we're doing what we're doing. And so it's not a great Twitter name. I won't read that part, but I also didn't really even see that until just now. But this fellow says, Jake Query once again had a positive impact on the life of another Hoosier. At 42, I've decided to obtain my nursing degree. Here's to us old dudes in college. Rodney Dangerfield would be proud. So this is a person that enrolled at Ivy Tech directly because he heard this campaign and was inspired to do something in someone he saw as an influencer. And whose path he could sort of emulate. So, we're still working on, this was a short campaign, in terms of both money and timing, but we're going to continue to develop we had about 500 leads from the bracket challenge by itself. So we're going to continue to work with those leads and continue to email them and convince them to come back and get a workforce ready grant. And very lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about our upcoming campaign, which is College Go. This is going to run from, our College Go campaign runs roughly from September through November in all of Indiana's schools. We are actively sending materials. Our shipments, I believe, just went out this week with new posters, a series of brand new one-pagers that we talked with educators through a focus group this summer. What did they actually want in their hands to give the students? And so College Application Week is September 26th through 30th. So if you're on any of the social media accounts or want to follow along or want to contribute to why you went to college, or what's driving you today, or continue to help us share this information, I would encourage you to do that. Again, this is our Learn More Indiana College Go page, a snapshot of it from our almost done, refreshed Learn More Indiana website. So we're already seeing great conversion rates from this page, just generally having promoted it through College Go specifically. We've had over 160% of people are converting the way that we want them to, is in they're downloading information from the site. And this is just the one page that's done so far of the entire refreshed website, of which there will be a great Indiana College Corps presence as well. So this is one more way that we're trying to get the good word out. That, I'll take any questions.
Can I have that slide for the student commission member social media?
Of course you can.
Yes, so either like the poster would be good and just maybe like the dates to make sure I'm posting on the Insta.
Yeah. And since you brought it up, I'm gonna highlight Anne for just a second. She reached out to Allison and I before the last commission meeting, and she said, I've got this great idea, and it is a great idea. She's working actively with the school, whatever campus we're going to ahead of time, to get several students, active students at that campus, to sit down and talk with her and just kind of share about their experiences of college. We've also said, hey, Anne, go ahead and ask them, why did they go? And, or if their friends didn't go, why are they not going? And she's started her own student commission member social media presence, and she's had, I think, 2 really great experiences of conversations with students so far. And I got to sit in on the one we did at the last meeting, and my faith in humanity was renewed because of these young, bright students. So we really need to highlight Anne for the great work she's doing in this area.
Well, thank you, and thank you for helping me get it off the ground into our government reps. It's been great working with all of you, and looking forward to collaborating as we get around to more campuses as well. I will share really quick with College Go Week at our visit here at IU. One of the students said that's how he found his home here at IU, was he was able to apply for free on College Go Day, and it worked out, very well for him. So if anyone is interested in ever sitting in on one of the sessions, or stopping by or wants the information, please let me know. The students are very, very observant, but they are good at blocking out anyone else in the room and really just getting down and talking. So happy to have anyone join in. It's been a great experience. And as you said, really uplifts you after speaking with them and all of their ambitions and what they're doing on campus. Thank you.
Any other questions for Charlie?
I've got one. Charlie, I don't know, I always forget what we call these, but some years back, we had, in many of the counties across the state, we had, what do we call them? College or post-secondary advisory groups.
College success.
That's it. Yeah, Success Coalition.
Yeah.
Are any of them still around, and are they worth looking back at and maybe tweaking in some way to
Yeah.
have? I'm just thinking back on some of the other communications on, in different sectors of the state, who do people listen to, in a sense? So,
Yeah, that's a great question. I do believe some of them are still active. They're sort of just doing it on their own in some instances. From what I understand of the sort of roll up of the college success coordinators, it also turned a little bit into the Indiana Talent Network. And that became sort of the overarching kind of where all of that information was going for a little while. That's now been taken over by the Indiana Chamber of Commerce, but we're still working closely with them. I don't know if anybody else has more longer term. Stacy, okay. But of course, we still have our 8 hours coordinators in the field that work closely with their K-12 and
Right.
colleges as well.
I was just, I mean, not to belabor it, but I was thinking about Crawford County. And Secretary Jenner talked about the Crawford County, and I'm fairly familiar with Crawford County, how challenged they are as a county from any number of levels. And I think she mentioned that they are completely committed to the College Core within their high schools, which to me is really interesting. I think it's really hopeful, but I'm wondering what led them to do that? Or how did they make the determination that that was something that they should commit to when lots of other places haven't?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. It's a good one, and I think we should probably go and ask them. So I think that's where we start, is asking them to share their experience and best practices with us. But I think it also kind of connects to what Dennis was asking about earlier. You know, how are we 10 years in, and it seems like a lot of people don't know about it. I think it also wasn't a really very intentional on all of our parts to be really clear about what it actually was. I mean, I didn't know what STGEC stood for when I started at the commission. So part of it is we've renamed it, where there's a whole lot of force behind it. And I think the force multiplication, because we have new post-secondary providers, the more that we continue to get schools and providers incorporated into it, I think the bigger it'll grow. And I think that's how we're trying to do it from a communication standpoint as well. So thanks for the question.
And correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it the teachers have to have an additional credential to be a part of it? So
Yeah.
I think that's some of the lack is there may be student interests, but are the teachers in that corporation all willing to go and get additional education? So I think that, you know, it really has to start with them before we can even target the students, which is almost the harder part. And as you look at the last 2 years and less teachers in our workforce and who's making the extra efforts, how many teachers out there are really putting in the time and dedication that students in the corporation need. I think this all is a very cyclical effect in the sense that while we want to push the program, it's got to start with additional education for those teachers.
Yeah, we do need the resources, and I'm sure, I know Ken has presented before about the higher learning commissions. Previous to this year, we just got an extension to 2025 September, where anyone who taught dual credit, not just in Indiana, but throughout our accrediting region, have to have both a master's degree and at least 18 hours in the field in which they're going to teach, which is a big lift. And of course, trying to do that in the middle of the pandemic, even with the great partnership that we've had with InvestEd and with the teachers themselves and through CEL at the University of Indianapolis, through both Teach Dual Credit Indiana and the STEM Teach Initiative. So there are free options. Yes, how do we make sure that teachers are taking advantage of it and can take advantage of it? Right, so Chris, I don't know if you have
Yeah, you know, I'm dying to say something about this too, Charlie.
Sure.
And I think it's a great question, and I think part of what's come about is natural to a challenge. How do we think about it in the context of the way in which we've always thought about it? And additional education for those teachers, again, we've received the next 2-year delay from HLC, that's great. But what it's also causing is innovation. And I know Secretary Jenner and I and Ken Sauer and I have talked about it. So, for example, there's a consortium in northeastern Indiana that is a consortium of schools saying to each other, hey, how can we get there together, right? So in Charlie's school, I'm making this up, but she has a teacher who can teach physics. And in Ed's school, they have the person who can teach Combo 101, right? And how do we make sure that all of those students through this consortium can be reached in order to achieve the Indiana College Core? You know, another thing that some school corporations are doing a partnership already with Vincent and Ivy Tech, and I'm sure it'll be the same with the others that have been added, is saying, while the student can only get, I'll make this up, but 21 of the 30 hours for the Indiana College Core resident at their high school, how can that institution, perhaps in another location, perhaps just down the street, I haven't lived in a town where they do that, how can the student go ahead and get the rest of those credits? And so, yeah, what's the necessity, the mother of invention or something is an admirable term or phrase. These are exactly the kind of challenges which I think are just invigorating because they get all of us to look for innovation, maybe where we haven't looked at it before. When someone, for example, issues a challenge of, hey, in 3 years, we need to have every high school offering Indiana College Core. Great question.
Any other questions for Charlie? Yeah, Charlie, thanks. And that's obviously what I was talking about right before you started on that section. So exciting, yeah. Going to be great to see the, that advertising and or highlights of different things that we offer out there in the public, and very excited for that. So, all right, we are on to the information items portion. Just so you know, they're on page 33, start there in your book. We're closing in on the adjournment here, but any old business? Any new business for the commission? I'll say, again, thanks, Liz, and see you in some other areas. Luck to you. I will not be at the meeting next month, so Erica Stewerman will be filling in for me. Thank you, Erica. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you. Thanks.
That's a little severe. That's very cool.
You're all doing so right.
Well, it's a
Like this one. Nice.
Appreciate it. Thank you.